Welcome to Into the Gnar, where the cutting edge of software gets built. I'm Mike Stone. This is my co-host, Nick Maloney, and today we have a big one. This is our first guest episode, and we've got Cort Johnson on the pod. Cort started Terrible Labs back in 2011, where Nick joined the team, and they worked together for a few years until an acquisition by Autodesk. He's been an operator and an advisor across Boston Tech ever since, plugged into the VC scene, and he's one of the most committed non-engineer AI users we know. So today we're talking about the AI Capex wave, the chip story, and how startups should actually be using AI right now. Let's get into it. Cort, welcome to Into the Gnar.
I was going to say, Mike, you don't know enough people if I'm going to be the guiding light here for a non-technical AI user, but I just want to say thanks for having me, guys. It's great to see you. And yes, I've known Nick for a long time, got to meet you, Mike, back in the day. So excited to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, great to have you as our first guest here. And we've been just stuck outside the office for too long. So the network shrinks, but you're at the top of the list right now as AI experts outside engineering. And we got a lot to dig in there. We're going to start out just kind of talking about some of the latest news articles here, and then we'll dive in some more to your experience. But when we have guests on the pod, which is today, we like to get their takes on some news stories too. So we're going to start out with our first news item. This one is that Microsoft, Meta, Alphabet, and Amazon have all reported Q1 and either held or raised Capex guidance. Microsoft is tracking at 190 billion. Meta raised their spend to 125 to 145 billion. Alphabet 180 to 190 billion. Amazon 200 billion. Everyone's just trying to spend more and more. Cort, you've been on the operator side across a lot of these cycles, and you gotta have a nose for this stuff. When you see 700 billion of Capex going into a single category in a single year, what does that signal to you? Does that feel right, look right? Does something seem off? Is that going to break? What's your take?
Look, I'm not smart enough to go think in too complex of a way about this. I guess I break it down to just a simple idea, which is a lot of people are investing a lot of money in the ability to deliver AI and the ability to leverage these LLMs and all these use cases. And at the end of the day, is it delivering value? I think from my perspective, from where I sit, there's a lot of value that's already been created. And I would imagine with just the investment, they're anticipating that there will be a lot of additional value to be created in the future. And so I don't think that people are going to use AI any less in the future. So I got to imagine they're racing to build the infrastructure to be able to support the demand in the future. So look, is it the right financial amount to invest? Are they investing too quickly? I can't answer that question, but I do believe that there is value, a ton of value being created. And a lot of people smarter than me are betting on the fact that the value that they can deliver will only improve over time. So I guess in my eyes, I just would have to agree with some of the smarter people out there in the world.
Yeah, do you see that value getting super consolidated? Do you think that value is getting created for 5 companies, or are the second order players like chip companies, data center operators, agencies, founders? Do you think there's going to be some meat on the bone for them, or is there more consolidation at the top with the Microsoft, Google, Amazons?
To deliver the end output of me typing into ChatGPT, or to use Claude on a daily basis, or use Cursor to write code, or Perplexity to do whatever task. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. And I think there's a lot within that supply chain to deliver that output. I think we look at the big players in the space because they're the names that maybe more consumers and businesses are interacting with as a touch point. But there's going to be a lot of value created. Now, I would, from my own experience, I would say that the different frontier labs, some of these different companies offer more value to a specific task than others. So there will probably be some level of differentiation of value created. But then down the stack, starting with the chip makers, up to the power supply, up to the data center, the people that own the real estate for the data centers, the people that are actually running the data center internally. Like there's just so much within that supply chain that I think there's going to be there is a lot of value being added. Will there be consolidation? Probably. But it seems like right now there's a lot of money being thrown into the space. So there's a lot of money to be made. And the question is, what part of the stack do you think the most value can get created? And I don't totally know the answer to that at this point.
You covered a few areas that were top of mind for me. Like a lot of these companies are either hardware or hardware adjacent, and there aren't any of the major frontier model companies that we hear about today. And there's a lot more volatility in that space. You think that, and again, this is purely projection for 5 years out, but we may see some of the frontier companies move into this A-tier list, like an Anthropic either acquires or gets acquired by some of these companies?
So I guess the question you're asking is, will a frontier lab own more of the supply chain to become more vertically integrated?
Yeah, and essentially make this list we're seeing in the 5-year horizon.
Listen, I guess if I were thinking from their perspective, there's probably two things, like business continuity. If I'm vertically integrated, do I feel like I can do a better job of delivering the service and delivering the value at the end of the day to monetize the output? So maybe there's some vertical integration that drives that way of thinking. But on the other hand, do they really want to own it all? Is it better for them from a financial perspective to not have all of that on their balance sheet to have to deal with? And listen, like I said, there are a lot smarter people than I am, whether it's from the private equity world or whether it's just like capital markets or whatever it is, that are going to make that decision at the end of the day. But look, I think people will try different stuff. A lot of people are going to screw up, but it's going to inform what the best path forward is for how the market shakes out.
Hey, it's Mike. Before we continue, thank you for being here. Into the Gnar exists for one reason: to cut through the noise around custom software development and give you something actually useful. We want to build a community around that. So if something in this episode hit, or if there's a topic you want us to go deeper on, leave a comment. It genuinely shapes what we'll make next. Also, if AI is on your roadmap and you're not sure your team's set up for it, we made something for you. It's a free 2-minute assessment over at thegnar.com that tells you exactly where you stand. Link is in the show notes. All right, back to the conversation. Yeah, I think that leads pretty nicely into our next news item, is around some consolidation and some of these second order players, but it's around the chip story. So AMD just had a monster Q1, and the chip story is moving away from Nvidia now. AMD is up 97% year to date. Nvidia is up 15%. So kind of curious your take on this. Do you feel that the Nvidia monopoly era is ending, or is this just a wider bench growing under it?
That's a great question. I am not as deep in this space as some of these other folks. My understanding, like with Nvidia, is they've done a really nice job to create a walled garden around their ecosystem, from having the operating system to define how the chips operate to manufacturing the chips themselves. I would surmise that there's just too little compute out there that they can manufacture on their own, that there's enough pull from a business outcome perspective, whether it's the people that are trying to deliver compute where they can buy cheaper chips from an AMD, that might be driving some of the consumption here, or just like a pure supply and demand thing. Maybe that there isn't enough supply to get from Nvidia, or there's pricing pressure, or they just want some level of diversification across their portfolio of the hardware that they're buying. So I feel like Nvidia's still going to run and continue to grow based on all the work that they've done. But it appears that there's room in the market based on how money is moving for other players to come in.
Yeah, I imagine it's only a matter of time before we hear more names along with AMD here, but I guess that leads to another question of, does any of this matter to a founder building something today? How much do you actually care about the chips?
I mean, again, I come back to value. Like, how am I delivering value if I'm building a service, building a product? And then if I'm looking at operating my business, how do I make sure that my operating costs are as low as possible to deliver the best service to improve my margin? And so it may matter, but I mean, I guess it depends on the type of company that you're thinking about. How many of these companies are using compute as a service versus trying to buy their own compute to run their own data center, as an example, to deliver that compute? I guess from my perspective, like looking at early stage technology companies, I'm probably using compute as a service. And so I'm probably searching for the best price to performance of any of the offerings out there.
Right. You don't have that sweet setup like Maloney in his basement with all his chips crunching, who walks by his house, and facial recognition, and
That's right.
keeping the neighborhood safe.
I hear he's repurposed all of his blockchain or his Bitcoin mining infrastructure to be delivering compute as a side hustle.
I've got to heat the house somehow. I repurposed the ones that didn't almost burn down our office. True story.
I was gonna say, driving past your house, it was odd that during all those snowstorms, there was no snow around your facility, but everywhere else there was plenty of snow.
Yeah. We did have a bit of an emergency response team at our old office for when the chips would go up in smoke. So
I can say this now because he's no longer our landlord, but we had free electricity at one of our previous offices. And it may or may not have mined some Ethereum. That was a good deal. And it may or may not have caught a unit on fire that got thrown along their roof.
So no fire extinguishers in the office at the time.
A few arrived on Amazon the next day.
I was going to say, at Terrible Labs, I think we bought a fire extinguisher just thinking that something in this office is going to go wrong and we're probably going to need it.
Smart move.
yeah, it's not an if, but when.
Yeah, Nick Maloney works here, so something's going to combust on fire.
That's great. All right, well, let's move into our next segment and learn a little bit about Cort and what you're working on. And we dove right into the new stuff, but I want to just take a step back and kind of introduce you to the audience, not the intro that I made, but how would you describe yourself? What's your words? Not like the LinkedIn bio, but who is Cort Johnson?
Man, how would I describe myself? I've spent a lot of time in early stage technology. You kind of described this in the intro, but have spent time working at early stage technology companies, early days consumer tech, more recently data and analytics, and then have also spent time building my own company, which is where I got to meet Nick. And then ultimately, kind of after that company, which was sold to Autodesk, got to meet you, Mike, when Nick and you guys went to start Gnar. But have always been interested in early stage tech, just thinking about, and probably spent more time just thinking about enterprise software and thinking about some of the tough problems around data, infrastructure levels, security, thinking about problems related to that. And then worked at a venture firm for a little bit, investing in all of that type of technology. And then have been now on the operating side for the last 7 years, building companies around data and analytics.
And how clear was that path or vision to you when you were getting started out? Take me back to the pre-Terrible days where you're like, I'm going to start Terrible Labs and then I'm going to go off and do all of these other things. This is my way to get to that end. Or were you like going one step at a time and assessing each step as it came?
I mean, as somebody who was not technical at the time, when I was graduating college, Facebook had just gotten going. And so like, how sexy of a company was that? The romantic story of starting a company in college and then bringing it to market and then just exploding. And so you kind of look at that and you're like, oh, this seems like a fun, easy thing to do. You could be a college kid and build a company like this and have it be insane. And so you kind of get excited about learning more about how to build companies like that, enamored with the romantic idea of building an early stage tech company and watching it grow. And so probably for all the wrong reasons related to that, got more interested and involved in looking at early stage tech. And then from there, just tried to change my mentality. And so less about focusing on the romantic idea of how easy this could be to build a company, and then more about, hey, I want to go put myself around really smart people that know what they're doing, and how can I learn from them so that I can build a skill set to go and do this myself one day. And that's where I've kind of spent the last, man, it's embarrassing to say, but it's 20 years since we graduated college. Yikes. To just focus on building companies in the early stage tech space, and then spend most of that time in the Boston area.
Nice. Yeah, I think there's like a advantage you have. I guess there's pros and cons, but there's a bit of an advantage when you're young and you can be naive and just say, hey, I'm going to start this thing, right? It's along, like, when we think about the Gnar, it was a calculated risk in that we knew we had a model that could be successful, but we kind of just jumped in and did it. Was there anything and a lot of that was modeled after Terrible Labs and the success you guys had and how you structured that business. But when you were getting started, was there anything in the Boston software scene that made you want to build Terrible Labs? Or were you like, let's start a business and it's going to be this and we'll figure out how to make it work?
A couple of things, like the two guys that I started Terrible Labs with, Joe Lind and Jeremy Weiscott, and I'll give them the credit. They were the technical guys behind being able to go basically run a consulting shop, right? We're selling heads on a stick, as most of the other consultants that I used to talk to would describe it. I didn't necessarily know anything about building that type of business. It was the confidence of those guys and the relationships that they felt like they had. And we lucked out. I always got to shout out my guy, Vlad Dadovsky over at Proxet. He connected us to, ultimately, Nick, your employer, MIU Health. And that was, there are two things. You're either building something or you're selling, right? And so you have to have revenue in order to support, especially a revenue-driven company. And so making sure that you have the right access to a customer base and folks who have a real problem that you know you can deliver on was insanely important. So it was a confluence of those two things. Joe and Jeremy on the technical side, their breadth and depth of being able to deliver value around what customers were looking for, but then also having access to people like Vlad and that network to have access to clients who needed things to get built where we could deliver that value. I mean, that's the two sides of that coin. I'll say the last piece is just like, everybody's so enamored with building companies based around venture dollars. And there is a time and a place to do that. But the other sexy thing is just making money. And building a revenue-driven company can be very sexy, especially if you're one of the founders and there's an opportunity to learn how to manage your finances, to drive profitability, and then how you can share that profitability across the company. So anyway, to people out there who are thinking about building businesses, I wouldn't get overly enamored with the idea of building something that's venture-backed. You can also do it driven from customer revenue. So that's a real option to build a successful business.
Cort, knowing what you know now, if you were to go back and start Terrible Labs over again with some of the wisdom that has been gained since then, would you consider some level of either venture raise or PE raise to accelerate growth and acquire other companies? Or would you stay the course and organically grow? Or would you look at it and consider it differently now as opposed to back then?
It's a great question. And I think it really depends on what your financial goals are. Like, quick anecdote, there's this barbershop in Needham, this young Brazilian dude, great barbershop, Royal Barbershop. And I was in there talking to him one day because he built this awesome business. It's packed all the time. And so naturally you think about this growth mindset, which is like, dude, why wouldn't you open a second one? If it's this packed here, okay, you're in Needham, go to Westwood, right? And open one there. And he's, why do I have to do that? I love the lifestyle that I built here. I'm making a lot of money. What's the point? And I think that was a really thoughtful put me on my heels, because it's okay. That's a great point. So to your question, Nick, like if I were to go and start it again, I would back into it from, all right, well, what's my real lifestyle objective here? And that's usually driven from a financial objective. It's driven from based on the amount of money that you want to make. What kind of life do you want to lead? How do you want to spend your time? And then you can, if you're lucky enough to be able to acquire customers in a certain way, like you can build your business around that mentality. And the golden rule, as people say, which is if you have the gold, you can make the rules. If you have the money, then you're financially independent of anyone else. As soon as you take venture dollars, it's growth at all costs, right? We have to drive to some sort of financial outcome at some multiple that's in excess of what the investment was made for. And that's a really different game than if you're building a business and you have a certain lifestyle, you have a certain financial objective you're trying to hit, like you can really back into that in a different way and be successful. So I know I didn't really totally answer your question, but I would just kind of think about solving the problem from that perspective as opposed to, okay, how do other people do it? Therefore, this is how I should do it.
Yeah, and there's not a textbook answer. I mean, you checked all the points that I think we all think about in evaluating that.
And it's in a different environment now than it was when you started Terrible Ads, when we started Gnar. I think obviously you can't say a few sentences without mentioning AI these days, and it has just taken over. Like you said, I don't think anyone's going to be using it less in the future than they are now. And it kind of gets me thinking, we've been having conversations with a lot of companies that are trying to figure out, like, how do we bring AI into what we're doing? But if you were CEO of a 50-person startup tomorrow, what's the first AI move you're going to make? Or maybe the flip side, what are the mistakes that you're seeing founders make?
It's a good question. And like AI, to what you said, Mike, from before, like AI is changing all the time, so it can do different things. But I guess the way that I kind of look at it is like, what are tasks that people are doing today where they might be repetitive, where we could just introduce some automation? One of the things that I am sure of is I do not have the best ideas. And so I always liked the mentality, and we did this at AtScale, which was just doing, I guess the old school term is a hackathon, but okay, bringing everybody from the company. I don't care what you do, just you have to use AI to do something and spend the next 6 hours doing it, and then just share it with everybody else. And I do believe that AI will make things a lot more efficient for certain tasks, but then once those tasks are completed, it's going to introduce a lot more problems that have to be solved. So it's, hey, I got this new output that I got out of AI. Well, what do I do with it? And that might be a more strategic, thoughtful question than we've traditionally asked people to answer, right? Because a lot of people are doing tactical, everyday sort of operational tasks. But now we have to be more thoughtful about it and to say, okay, we can execute this operational task. Well, what's the implication to the business? And then from there, it's like, now you're solving a whole new slew of problems. So like this comes into the, okay, well, what are we asking people to do? And what are the skill sets that they have to have? Like it kind of forces people to be, the people who are problem solvers or have frameworks to think about how to solve problems become way more valuable, because now I can take outputs that I used to have to go and derive on my own, but now I can apply them to problems that maybe I wasn't asked to solve before, but now I have the capability to do it and deliver maybe some real demonstrable value to the business.
I love that. I was just talking with a company earlier today about this, of like, we used to be employed to perform tasks, like to perform a job. And I think increasingly we're performing fewer and fewer tasks, but we've had to move up into being like problem solvers more than like any time before. And you're delegating the tasks down, but it's almost like you just got a big promotion in your job where you're no longer creating the spreadsheet or writing the code or performing a lot of the tasks you were before. And all that's going to happen at a lot higher speed. But now you're the strategy and you're the problem solving. And it's a massive adjustment for folks to make. And like you said, there are some people that are more wired for that than others.
Well, how are you guys thinking about it? Because like you guys are close to developing software, right? It's seemingly everything you hear about is the fact that it's like AI's biggest impact out of the gate, or one of its biggest impacts is in software development. So like, how do you guys think about the implications of AI or how it's affecting you guys building your business?
I think it makes sense as the first application of AI because it's good at the type of tasks that developers do, and it's a big expense. It's big number on the P&L of these companies. So it makes sense as the place to try to tackle the problems. Like you talked about, that's where the value is. We've changed our whole operational approach using it. I would say our developers really don't even write code anymore. And it's been a complete change into being that problem solver, understanding what is the product that we're building, how is it delivering value and impact to the clients, and then guiding the LLMs to produce the output that gets there. And that's been a change across all of our projects and has other impacts too around even billing and timelines, and everything gets condensed and changed, and time and materials billing and agile development, those aren't really part of what we do anymore. So it's been a pretty holistic change as we get more comfortable with it.
Yeah, it's allowed us to be more competitive too, because human labor, the cost of human labor it's not irrelevant, but it's such a force multiplier. It's not a perspective of, oh, we are billing engineers by the hour for a low rate. It's we have people that can effectively wield agents at 10x what a human could. And if we can optimize for that, then it's a much different game than having the cheapest hourly rate in town or in the world for that matter.
I think we're positioned to win a little bit there, because if you think, we used to lose work primarily to offshore because it's cheaper hourly, right? That was the problem that we had to solve. And the only reason you go offshore, the primary reason you go offshore, is because you can produce more code at a lower cost. But the code production is no longer the problem. It's not really what you're paying for. You're paying for the output. You're paying for the value being delivered. And so I think it leans more towards senior level, US based. You're having the conversations with the people performing the work. And so we're starting to see more of those companies come onshore, I think for those reasons, and less of it being sent overseas.
And I'm curious from your perspective, because just in talking to a bunch of companies, whether it's friends working there or just like companies that you end up chatting with from a sales perspective, AI can be spooky to especially engineers, because the perception in the market that's being portrayed is that it's going to take their job. And so you guys run a development shop, and so you're all about engineering. How do you get your engineers to embrace it and think about it as maybe a force multiplier, as opposed to it being a threat to their career?
You took the words right out of my mouth. That is the term that we use. It is a force multiplier. And your role is more of a manager now and less of hands in the code. And that's our training, that's our narrative. And the team has embraced that. AI fluency has been really clutch too, because there's always going to be anxiety to some degree, but it's helped resolve that when they become more familiar with it and realize, oh, wow, I can do 10x what I could do before, and I'm not losing control. I just interact with it differently. And when they start to progress up the ladder of AI fluency, then it really starts clicking. It really can deliver at multiples faster, and it just made the conversation a lot easier. But that's a very rosy picture, because there is still risk in our industry. Not everyone is on board, and you have to be at this point. I think fortunately for our team, they see where we're headed. I mean, it's embedded in our culture and how we work, but it's still going to cause anxiety for a lot of other companies. But I think the concept of fluency is the best way to address that early on. And there's a lot of benefit. It reduces the anxiety and it gets your team more proficient in using these tools as well.
And it isn't for everybody. And that's something we've talked about internally too. I think at the end of the day, people need to decide for themselves if this is the path they want to be in, because it is a different job. Just because you performed a job producing code does not mean you're going to enjoy and be good at a job leveraging AI to produce code. It's kind of like a good individual contributor does not, by definition, make a good manager, right? And so when there is resistance, what I try to tell folks is try to understand, like, why don't you like this? Do you not like this because it's change and you're not used to it yet? Or do you not like this because you genuinely don't like this type of work? Because if it's the latter, you need to change careers. This is the job as you know it doesn't really exist anymore. And I think increasingly that's going to become the case. But I know for myself, I was a little hesitant at first, but now when I think about writing code by hand, I'm like, oh, what a drag. I have the opposite feeling towards it than I did at the outset, but it is a different job. Not everybody is going to embrace and really be good at it. It's just a whole change management process.
Yeah. I think the next piece that's interesting, because only time will tell, is you guys are in a unique spot because you grew up writing code, right? You grew up learning how to review a pull request or commit to Git or whatever it might be. And like me as a layman who like had a rough understanding of how it worked or like the words to say in order to describe it, like I'm out there building apps and like it's freaking wild. And I guess my point being is like, okay, you're going to have this whole new generation of people that are technical engineering delivery people. I would imagine we'd want them to be able to know how to write code by hand if they had to, but is that even on the table anymore? Or are we just going to skip this whole idea of like people actually knowing how to write code and just allow AI to go and do it for the next generation?
Yeah, right. It's just like the next level of abstraction, right? There's so much in the languages we did write by hand that we didn't know was going on behind the scenes, right? That we didn't need to know. And is that going to be the case for the next crop of what we call junior engineers or whatever the title's going to be? But you touched on your use of tools, and I want to dive in there because I've heard a lot about how you are embracing this and using it a lot yourself. Walk us through what your stack is. I'm hearing terms like Obsidian and Notion and different models that you're using. How are you leveraging it right now?
It's a great question. For a long time, I would feel overwhelmed to try to have to learn a new tool or think about a new process in a different way and really force myself into it. So I think the first thing I had to do was just say like, I can learn something new in under an hour and feel pretty, not that I'm like great at it, but at least I can get the gist of, okay, well, this is why this is interesting. And I had never used examples. I'd never used Notion before. And like, I was all Google Drive, Google Docs, like Google Workspace, and forced myself into Notion and read a few blog posts as to why I should be using Claude. And so just was like, all right, F it. I'll just go in. Let's figure this thing out. And man, like within a day, I'm like, holy cow, like this has unlocked different ideas for me on like how to go and solve problems in a different way. Now I'll go to like, all right, well, what am I trying to do? Because like you got to start with the end goal in mind and work backwards. And most of my day had been thinking about how do I change the behavior of my children So two things. One, how do I get them to do the tasks that I want them to do on a daily basis? And then the other one is how do I brainwash them to love me as much as possible while doing all of those tasks? And so the stack that I have built is to try to figure out how to deploy programs where I can give them tasks to do, but they feel like it's a game, to go and get ready for school in the morning or get ready for bed at night, so that I can not feel the physical toll of me having to go and force and yell at them all night long in order to get into bed. And then the other one is just like, how do I do fun things to make sure that they are having as much fun with me as possible? And so I use different things for different problems. Most of the typical, okay, I'm doing software development, I need to build an app. I'm doing everything in Claude, getting Claude code, using Notion to do some of the output of stuff. I finally had heard enough about Claude's capabilities in the Microsoft stack, so I went and tried using like PowerPoint and stuff with it. The Obsidian thing is interesting because part of the pain that I felt over time was like, okay, it's great that I can use this LLM, but like, it's not a very good representation of who I am. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to portray myself to an LLM in order for it to mimic me as based on a task as well as possible. Tried different iterations of that, got to this one. You brought up Obsidian. Like, it was the most popular viral tweet from Andre Karpathy, I don't know, like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so I was like, all right, F it. Like I did this first iteration, kind of get the gist of how it works. Okay, now I'm just going to use this sort of framework that he put together. And then I like went in and read other people's sort of thoughts about it and how they were tweaking it and things like that. But basically took that model to try to take everything that I do and portray it as Markdown, and then use that Obsidian framework to link to all of these things, to do promotion and relegation of different ideas and things like that. And got it to a point where like, I actually feel pretty good if I need to respond to somebody with an email, or if I need to like create some collateral or something like that. Like, I think it does a pretty good job of representing me in that way. But anyway, you asked what my stack is. It's evolving all the time, but it's really based on what problems am I trying to solve. I'll say the last one that I think is actually kind of cool is I just think Google is doing some really interesting stuff. And for me, it kind of flies under the radar, probably because my algorithm is so tuned for a Claude. But they put out this music like capability within Gemini. And I had made up this song to convince my kids that they should love me, but then also the 5 steps they should do to like get ready for bed. And so like I came up with my own jingle to it, and I would sing it to them constantly towards the end of the day just to like mentally prep them to do it. And then I started playing with Gemini, and I put like the lyrics in, I did everything, and it came up with this awesome pop song that like they love to listen to it and they know the lyrics. And so like when it's time for bed, the first 2 lines are, "Oh, I love my daddy so much." And then the subsequent 5 steps are like everything I need them to do to go to bed. And then it ends with the beginning, which is, "Oh, I love my daddy so much." So now not only do they love me, but they got themselves ready for bed and they're feeling really good about it. So anyway, Gemini is great if you want to make up some music.
All right, I'm going to hound you for both of those things. I need the game, I need the song, I need everything you got. We're in the same era of life. If I can make that part, if I can have the kids love me and get to bed without meltdowns, like that's a win. So
Hottest new song. I'll put it up on SoundCloud. We can distribute it out for everybody here.
This sounds like a startup in the works right here.
Listen, Maloney, I'm just trying to solve my own problems, right? I need my kids to love me, and I need them to get ready for bed without me yelling at them.
amazing. All right, we're going to end with a little segment here, rapid fire segment. We've got 4 questions for you. These should be pretty quick hit items, and then we'll wrap things up. You may have already answered this. You answered this for me. I have a new answer to this question. If you could build any piece of software in the world, no constraints, unlimited budget, what would you build and why? Mine would be the song and games. What would yours be?
I've said this on repeat, but it's all about what's the value that I'm trying to drive. Some of it with the tinkering is just trying to learn. But then at the end of the day, it's like, how am I delivering something where I can monetize it? That's how I think about all this on a daily basis. So what would it be? I don't have a great answer for that yet because maybe I don't have the problem that I want to go and solve that I think can really be value generating financially. But look, there's so much out there. I think the cool part is that for people who are deep in a domain, you know the problems that exist within your world. There's a ton of value in being able to deliver that in a order of magnitude easier way. So there's nothing stopping anybody anymore. You can literally just go speak English and have all this stuff come into existence. It's just so wild. And so, yeah, I don't have an answer, but hopefully some other people out there do right now.
Nice. Something that makes a shit ton of money.
I know that's what Nick's thinking too. So I'm just preaching to the choir.
ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, or something else?
Man, I'm Claude number 1 because I use it mostly on a daily basis. I'm Gemini number 2 because I think it's pretty creative. And if I just have a question, I usually just go to ChatGPT for some reason, just to give me some web-based search type feedback.
What's one piece of software, like an app, tool, platform, anything like that, that you genuinely cannot run your life or business without?
I mean, it's the Claude desktop app. Claude desktop app is just, it's so good. I don't even know how to explain it. It's just so good. And then I think I've been having more conversations. Sorry, there's a bit of a tangent, but I've been having more conversations with folks. I talked about how using Obsidian to try to be a digital representation of myself, that's a really hard problem right now. And a lot of people want LLMs to write an email for them, but not put in M dashes as an example so that it doesn't look like it's AI. And really, that's a function of the LLM being able to leverage some digital representation of yourself. And so there's a real opportunity out there. And I've talked to some smart people who are working on this problem, but to just, is it easier than Mark Zuckerberg at Meta trying to force its employees to track all their clicks and how their eyeballs are moving across the screen? Like, how do we figure that one out? So there's a cool opportunity there.
Yeah, I agree. Are you a coworker code guy when you're in the desktop app?
I probably spend 80% of my time in co-work, 20% in code.
Before Claude shut it down, I don't know if you had a chance to play with OpenClaw. That was the best tool that I have yet used that attempted to have some personality that I trusted, that didn't feel too robotic. It's such a shame that it no longer works in a cost-effective manner with Claude. It just knocked it out of the park. It was a daily driver for me, so I'm sad that it is no longer as relevant.
Listen, I need somebody to just, I've watched a ton of videos on OpenClaw. I've tried to understand it and think about like how I would use it. I need somebody that just like, Maloney, I need to see how you were thinking of using it or what you were trying to get it to do.
It's a non-starter now, though, because you can't use your Claude Max account with it and it burns through tokens. So unfortunately, it just ain't what it used to be.
I'll say the one thing that we didn't really talk about that I think about a lot is how do I make sure that I feel like I'm not falling behind in all this? And it's so easy because I'm still a big Twitter guy. It's really the only social media that I have, but I have my algorithm is all AI basically, and any Buffalo sports content. So those are my two things, my algorithm. And you can get pretty overwhelmed quickly just seeing the evolution of this stuff. And so there are some blog posts or there are some bloggers that I like. There are some video people putting out YouTube videos that I'll try to follow. But the other piece is in Boston, and I know Ryan Durkin at Whoop is doing an awesome job with trying to pull together this AI consortium, and that's so good. I'm trying to hack it a little bit myself where it's like, how do I put together a dinner, which, I did a week ago with some other folks to just learn from other people. And one of the use cases, Nick, that made me think about this was like, I wanted this guy just to like present on how he was using OpenClaw so that I could figure out, is it worth my time trying to go and do this? And so it's like the creativity around being able to go and learn as much as possible, as quickly as possible, try stuff out. There's just so much importance to being able to go out and do that. So I encourage anybody who's really interested in AI, like you got to go try to learn and talk to people, which is probably not what people are thinking about going out and talking to other people about how to use AI, but whether it's staying online, finding some good content that you can go and test out. Because like we've said, stuff's changing so fast and there's so much cool things that you can figure out to do that you didn't think you could do in the past.
I haven't heard one person that tries to stay up to date with AI say they like aren't overwhelmed. Everybody that tries to stay relevant with AI has expressed this feeling of being overwhelmed. I think the only way to avoid it is like head in the sand, ignorance is bliss, and try to ignore it. But it carries a burden with it when you like get these tools and you're so like equipped to create so much value at a speed you couldn't even fathom before, but you feel so far behind at the same time. It's wild.
Totally. Yeah. You guys try.
We do a lot of inter-team learning. So we have a weekly like agentic roundtable so people can basically vote on topics that they want covered. So if you're working on something cool or you're interested in something, you can put that in a sheet and then the team votes and whoever's knowledgeable on that will talk about it. And we have a pretty like curious team. So like everyone's poking at different things and everyone comes together once a week. That's been the best source for me, along with just, I would say LinkedIn's probably my one social platform and I follow a lot of folks there and watch some videos.
Yeah, same like YouTube, TikTok, the algorithm feeds me and stuff with AI, along with people doing a bad job backing their boat trailer in. So I get all of the above. But to Mike's point, one area we've been deliberate on around collaboration is we have an AI working group within the company, and just gives an element of accountability so that it's not just a free for all. Like we're trying to curate and deliver a more guided experience and also hold people accountable for sharing their learnings and seeing things through completion. And that's gone a long way. And we've even talked about expanding that. So if other companies want to join in and it's a more collaborative, like brown bag session, that's something we're exploring. But that is bar none where I've learned the most about AI, because we're able to get into the weeds, ask questions, and we're not just consumers of that information via TikTok. It's having real conversations. And I think what you're doing resonates with that as well. Talking to humans, asking thoughtful questions is the best way to learn.
Yeah, I like that. The seeing somebody do it versus it almost seems like they're on Twitter, at least they're all like AI is just writing what the person wants to explain. And I'm much more of, I want to hear a human talk about it so that I feel like there's some veracity to it. So anyway, yeah, I like that.
All right, we have one more of these. I know we're kind of already over time. I'll just say it to you because it harkens back to a certain question from the Terrible Labs days, as I've been told about a mermaid, but this one's slightly different. But just a question to keep things light. Would you rather fight 40 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck?
I think I would rather fight the one horse-sized duck. Like I would, rather than trying to keep track of 40 duck-sized horses to like have to deal with, that arguably maybe they can work together. Like if they're able to communicate somehow or think about they're all trying to attack me. I'd rather focus on the one thing. Because if I'm going down, I'll at least know it was this one thing that took me down versus like me thinking that maybe I can take on 4 little horses.
100%. You've aced the test. That is the correct answer. Oh, all right. You win this week's Into the Gnar. But yeah,
I love it. What do I win?
You get to be our first guest. So.
I want a green screen. That's that's a prize I want, Nick.
All right. Well, that's a wrap on today's episode of Into the Gnar. Cort, thanks so much for joining us. If you're listening and you're in the middle of a software decision you're not sure about, or you need a team that ships without chaos, come find us at thegnar.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and we'll see you in the Gnar.